Welcome to the Mutually Amazing Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Domitrz with the Center for Respect. The episode you're about to listen to was recorded when this show used to be called the Respect Podcast, so you might hear that mentioned during this episode. Well, let's get to the show. And this week we have Dan Clark, that is founder, speaker, and coach. He helps small business owners grow their businesses online. Dan is a dad of 3 kids, world traveler, and happily married. Welcome, though. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan.
I appreciate being asked to jump onto the podcast. So I've heard some great things and looking forward to speaking to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And here we talk a lot about respect. How does respect play a role when it comes to loyalty to someone's clients in business and to their staff? Because that's we hear out there the customer is always number one. And now there's more pushback about we got to be careful of that. So how does respect play in when it comes to clients, customers, and those that we employ, staff?
I love that question. I love that you spoke about loyalty as well. So my 2 biggest personal values are loyalty and respect. They're super high for me. And I think what I love about them, because a lot of people tend to say integrity is more important than loyalty. And what I prefer loyalty and respect is because I think it's more of a selfless act, because it is about others as opposed to myself. And I think that as you kind of like jump into business and start to have a bit of success and things start to go, pretty well for yourself, it does very much become about serving other people. And to me, that is very much servant leadership. And so it's huge for us. It's huge for what we do inside of our organization. It's huge for what we do in terms of what we coach and teach people. And I think it's just that little bit that we can do to try and make the world a little bit of a better place.
And when you say it's a difference of, being self-focused, is that integrity is, do I have integrity? Loyalty is about to others. So you're saying that when it comes to integrity, people tend to think, do I have integrity to? It's just, do I have integrity? Versus loyalty, I have loyalty to that, that person, that organization, that entity.
I think so. Yeah.
And so then with that, how does respect and loyalty, how do they go hand in hand?
The key thing with loyalty and respect is it's kind of a two-way street, right? They kind of like fit into one another, because when you have loyalty, it tends to generate that mutual respect between people. I think it's very hard to respect someone who doesn't have loyalty to themselves, loyalty to their goals, loyalty to their team. So I think it's much of the same, really. I think they're very, very exclusive to one another.
Well, let's start with, how do you define loyalty?
Well, for me, loyalty is something which is you doing an act, or you speaking about a person or doing something for a person or another in a certain way, regardless of whether somebody knows about it or not.
Very interesting, because usually when we hear of loyalty, people will say, oh, it's commitment, dedication to a person or organization. How loyal am I to you is based on weird things like, well, we'll have this test to see how loyal they are. This will test their loyalty. Do they stay with us or do they go somewhere else? Where what you're describing is very different.
Because I think it's very easy to have surface level loyalty, almost like show loyalty. Oh, I'm going to write that thing on social media because it looks like I'm being loyal to this person, or I'm going to say this thing in a meeting, where in actual fact, behind the scenes, they're showing up in a completely different way. And, I think there are different types of loyalty. People sometimes are in our life for a reason, some people for a season and whatever. But I think true loyalty is being committed to somebody in that way for the long term. And it's the good and the bad. And it's the acceptance of that. And it is knowing that that person will probably make mistakes, as you will make mistakes, but still remaining loyal to that person.
Well, and I love that you said the good and the bad, because a lot of times when we think of organizations, they're at the business level, the corporate level, people go, yeah, I'm loyal as long as they don't screw up too much. Well, then that's as long as it's not loyalty, right? There's a precursor there. True loyalty wouldn't have that, right? No matter what I'm going to be there. That doesn't mean that I'm going to employ you. Like if you are not following our core values, you're not doing your job, I can actually fire you and still be loyal to you as a person. Like, right? In theory?
Yeah, in theory. But I think of loyalty as like, I have 3 kids. I'm loyal to my kids. It doesn't matter what they do in their life. It doesn't matter how much they mess up. I'm still loyal to them. Like, I'm always going to love them. I'm always going to be there for them. I'm always going to pick up the pieces, whatever they do. And I think that's a great way to lead an organization, to lead a business, because the people who have always been my best members of staff have been the people who have always done something terribly wrong at some point. They've made a huge cock up. They've done the wrong thing, or they've said the wrong thing. But by giving them the opportunity to make it right, I think it builds that trust. It builds respect. And it is, to me, loyalty of, we're in this together. Because if I do something wrong in the future, I'm also giving you permission to give me a second chance as well. It's a two-way street. Yes. And that's what's beautiful about it. So how do you define respect? For me, respect is almost more like a feeling as opposed to an action. When I tend to think of it at a deeper level, as in, when I feel wanted, trusted, needed, I think respect is very much an emotive subject. It's very hard to literally describe what respect is unless you're kind of giving people almost like a score chart that they have to achieve. Often people say that I don't feel respected. So I think it's hard to kind of constitute what it is. But I think respect in terms of a feeling tends to be coming from people having a sense of knowing and trust and contentment with that person, which I think comes a little bit with depth of trust. I think that's how a lot of it comes with. Like, for example, my wife, I respect her because I know, for example, she's on holiday at the moment with the girls on a yoga retreat. I trust her implicitly. And so therefore I have respect for her. And I know that she has respect for me because I know that there wouldn't be anything there. It doesn't even come onto my radar. To me, that's respect. And it's a feeling that I have of trust.
I love it. And speaking of your spouse, you work side by side together.
We do.
So how does So how does that, what are techniques, strategies, approaches you two take for helping that thrive in a way that can be respectful? Because that can be tough for a lot of couples. And it's not a good choice for some couples. Like some couples have loving relationships. They shouldn't work together. There are other people who have loving relationships who it works beautifully for them to work together. So how did you figure that out? What are paths that you've taken along the way that have taught you lessons?
Well, the one thing I know is that it's impossible to have two alpha characters. Somebody has to be alpha, someone has to be beta. You can't have two people competing for almost like the top role, which is kind of weird when you're in a marriage and you're equal and you both bring your skills to the table. But still, I think in business, especially when you're working as a couple, one person has to take a leader role. I think the key with it is communication between us because, for example, at the moment, I'm leading a lot more than my wife, but I don't want to always be leading. There'll be her chance, and there's been times in the past where she has taken a more dominant role in the business because it would be serving her strengths better than mine. So I think that's the key. It's to kind of drop the ego. It's really easy to have an ego in a relationship and bring that into business of I think I'm better, no, I think I'm better. And it just leads to, a battle and competition, but not in a good way. But I think it's giving somebody that opportunity to say, hey, you step forward. I'm backing you. I think you're the person to lead this. And, it's that little bit of a nod of respect, to say you're the person. I'm now going to do my job in the best way possible by being supportive to you, as opposed to being in that secondary position thinking, hey, you're a bit of a dick. I wish I was doing this, where it's not all in on that. And that for us has worked really, really well for us, where one's led, but the other has been very supportive in that more secondary role.
Well, and I get what you're saying. I can hear people listening thinking, what? What do you mean they both can't be equals in that role? But there does come a point where if you disagree, somebody has to have the final say. And if there's only two people, somebody's got to be one of those two people. And if you don't have that established when it comes to this, the final say is person A. But when it comes to this, the final say is person B. If you know that established, yes, it can cause a lot of rift.
Yeah, it comes down to those agreed commitments. And you need to agree those beforehand so it then reduces any friction of, well, whose opinion is more important. If you've agreed beforehand when emotion is involved that you're going to be the person that leads this project, well, then it rests with that person who makes the decision. And whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. That person's leading. If they choose to ask for help, well, then that's cool, right? because there's nothing worse than somebody offers you advice when you don't want it. And that's the key, really, is when it's in a non-emotional state, very much a logical business conversation, then yeah, it allows for that future conversation to be less stressful, shall we say?
Yes, and you travel a lot with your kids. Now, are you running your business while you're doing that, or are those separate? So you are. Okay. So how does that work? Because I think that's a unique discussion a lot of our listeners haven't had before, which is traveling, working, and you have 3 kids. So how does that work for you?
So our business is fully online. I mean, literally, it's a mobile phone and a laptop business. We have a team that work for us. We have employed staff, but they're all remote workers. So we don't have a central office base as such. In terms of how you make it work when you're traveling and you're homeschooling and you're kind of doing all the things, it just comes down to probably 3 things, which is huge discipline, saying that you're going to do something and making sure that you do the bloody thing. Second, you've got to be super organized, that was the hardest thing for me because I've always been a freedom kind of guy. So I've always kind of pushed back and rebelled against routine, but actually, once you commit to it, you recognize how much more freedom it does give you. And the third thing is you can't just schedule business stuff. You have to schedule family stuff and husband-wife stuff and downtime. It all needs to get put in there. You can't just write a to-do list of, I need to write my sales page, I need to do my email, I need to do this, blah, blah, blah. Just business stuff and think, I'll just kind of fill in the family time around it. It needs to be just as big, if not more so a priority when you're actually planning your work and planning your schedule across the next 7 days, 30 days, however far in advance you need to go to make it work for you.
Yeah, people used to ask me, they'd see my schedule and they're like, oh my gosh, you're doing 40 events in like 3 months. How are you doing that with kids? And we'd always say, well, look closely at the schedule. What you're going to see is that Mondays are all off because at that time my son had high school soccer games and they were Monday, Wednesday. So that would ensure I was at least, if not more than half the games. You have to be dedicated to that.
Yeah. People laugh when I tell them that I have to schedule in time to eat lunch with my wife and I have to schedule in time to just spend with the kids and watch TV. Like, I think it's a kind of weird thing to schedule in. But if I don't, then I can find myself defaulting into work mode because it's often I find work easier than home life because 3 kids, they're 7, 5, and 3. Like, they're a handful. There's often times where I don't want to have to perhaps do the bath and bed routine because I know that it's probably going to be pretty crazy and I'm maybe stressed with work that I need to do something. So if it's scheduled in though, and I'm disciplined and committed to doing it, it takes the pressure off. Obviously we didn't always have 3 kids. We built them up over time. When you have 1 kid, maybe even 2 kids, you can quite easily, try and do both at the same time. Like, you can do laptop stuff while you're sat on the sofa with the kids. When you've got 3, there is not a chance on this earth that you can do family and business at the same time. So it's really a blessing for us to have 3 kids because it made us draw a very clearly defined line between work and family life, which has turned out to be a total blessing for us.
Love it. Now, what do you think, as you've been doing that, where do you think has been the most difficult aspect? Is it that idea that, no, I need to finish this right now. That's scheduled for 3 o'clock. I need to get it. But this is so important. How do you avoid the trap of this is so important? The business is so important.
Experience of knowing that nothing's actually going to be that wrong or go that badly if you just leave it another day or so. I mean, I've always been taught that you need to have urgency. It needs to get done straight away. And in actual fact, yes, urgency is important, but not day to day. Yes, there are times where you have to push, but there are also times where you just have to maintain. Once you've been doing it for quite a while, we've been doing it a few years now, you learn to kind of relax into it. And you realize that one person that's messaged you at 11 o'clock at night who needs to have an answer straight away actually is okay if you miss them tomorrow morning between 9 and 10, which is when you've scheduled your time to reply to clients. So it comes with experience. Yeah,
and this is a really key one that a lot of people struggle with. They think, but I have this fire I have to get to right now. And the fact is, if you weren't in your email right now, you wouldn't have saw the fire.
Yeah, building a team protects you.
Yeah, the person who emailed you didn't know you were in front of your computer at that moment checking email. They might even know your computer, but they didn't know your email was up. So if you didn't see it, they wouldn't have known the difference and you would have responded tomorrow. And that would have been just as soon as you saw it. So that's this big thing. We think everything's a fire, right? Versus there aren't too many things. Like a doctor has lives on the line. And if they don't respond, that's very different. Very few of us are in that category.
Totally agree. Having a team has been super helpful with that stuff as well, because it's just put an extra layer of protection between me with the day-to-day running of things, which is where you tend to see the drama, as opposed to having more of a bird's eye, 20,000 feet view of the business. So it's only fires are brought to you because it's really important, as opposed to it's just a little tiny flame flickering, but it could turn into something big. So that's been super helpful as well.
Well, and you specifically are in the online space. You help people build online businesses. How do you help people do that? Like, for instance, social media. Everybody's trying to sell on social media without feeling like they're selling, but it feels like everybody's selling, right? So, and people are getting more creeped out, right? I looked up this in Google and now it's in front of me and people are getting very creeped out. So I'm going to ask two different questions. How do you sell on social media without selling per se? And how do you run that online business ethically without crossing those lines?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, in terms of like how to sell on social media, is I've yet to meet a single person that actually enjoys any level of selling whatsoever. And so the problem that people have is they don't enjoy it. They don't enjoy receiving it. And I always give this example. So we have this over in the UK. I know you guys have this in the US. Like, if you ever go down the high street or your main shopping street, and you'll tend to always get this at the weekend, where you'll see a youngish person, tends to be a millennial, who is holding a clipboard and they're trying to get you to sign up to some form of charity, right? And what everybody does when they see that person is they just either put their head down, they pretend that they're on their mobile phone, or they just ignore them, or they dive into like a shop or whatever. And people don't like to be sold to. And it's just how we are. Like, we just, as a human species, we tend to think, oh, danger, I'm going to get sold into something. But the truth is that we all like to give to charity, but it's just that we don't like to be sold into it. So instead, what we need to do is just recognize that we need to bring people into our world first before we start to sell them, because we can't actually give any sort of genuine recommendation to a person without understanding a need, which means that we have to have some level of engagement first. We then have to have a conversation to then be able to make a recommendation. So how do we do that on social media? Well, it's really interesting because my eldest, Sienna, she's 7 years old. And she really loves this stuff. And obviously, you know, how we live our life is going to rub off on her. But, you know, she's really into it. You know, she reads the books on her own. She's reading stuff on Target Market, and she's reading the ClickFunnels books and all that kind of stuff, right? And obviously, I know the questions that I need to ask her to kind of like prompt a certain response. But intuitively, she knows how to deal and treat people. She knows it because there's no filter there. There isn't anything that she's been taught. There's no salesmanship in it. There's just genuine normalness to her. And I think in many ways, what we do, it isn't a case of learning people stuff. It's a case of just unlearning all of this programming that we've been taught. And I think we're also in this kind of a weird place where stuff that was taught before, salesmanship, selling stuff, which did work in the 80s, 90s, like the early 2000s. With this kind of rising consciousness that we seem to be seeing around the world now, and people kind of waking up a bit more, and the rise of female empowerment and like the Me Too movement and all this kind of stuff, where people are kind of waking up, and information that's available online it's all coming together at this one point where people are pushing back and rebelling on what was, so they can now go forward with what is, which is actually just being a normal person and doing a decent job, which actually isn't that difficult to do when you just remove all of the BS.
And I love this because as a speaker, you know, we both speak, and there's a lot of people out there saying, you've got to put content out, put content out, put content out. And it almost feels like there's so much, like I'm watching people who are very good at doing that are constantly putting quotes up, constantly putting this. But I also think this isn't what social media was for. They're not sharing their lives. They're sharing things to make you share them.
Yes. And it's the intention behind it.
Yeah. And I've done it. I've made the mistake because people said, that's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. So, all right, I'll pop out these quotes. And I think social media was just for us to be social and connected. And I find the more that I just post a picture of a sunset.
Normal stuff.
And people are like, that has nothing to do with your business. Why are you posting sunsets? You know what's interesting? I get more people commenting about my sunsets.
And that's what it's about. It's all about like creating an audience. Like if you was in a huge mega room and there was 8 different speakers on a stage, like you're not trying to sell the hardest, because the person that sells the hardest doesn't necessarily sell the most. The person that sells the most is the person that has the most people standing in front of their stage. And people will stand in front of your stage if you're talking about your selfie of the sunset because they want to know more about it. They're welcomed into your world. And before, people used to follow up people until they joined. And I think now the flip is actually what we're doing is we're loving people in. We're loving people into our products. So we're just encouraging them closer and closer and closer until they're ready to make a buying decision. And so a lot of what we used to do, it would pitch, sell, and then follow up 7 to 12 times because that's actually when people join. Instead, now what we do is we teach 7 to 12 exposures before we make a pitch.
And so is the difference the 7 to 12 touches are just
salesy?
Yeah, they're not salesy at all, right? They're not driven. You need to see 7 quotes from me. You could just see my son graduated. Here's a sunset. Here's a this. And by the way, we have this new thing.
There needs to be some business stuff there, right? Because it's just lifestyle all the time, then no one knows. So we tend to say there's 4 key pillars of content, a blend of lifestyle, value, social proof, and entertainment, which kind of gives you pretty much most things, right? Lifestyle is the stuff we was talking about. Value is something which is going to help your target audience specifically solve a problem to get them closer to where they want to get to. Social proof, you've got to show your own journey because that's very attractive and magnetic, someone who's having success. But also people care more about themselves. You've got to show social proof of clients similar to them, they've had results that you've been able to help with them. And entertainment, I mean, it's social media, right? Just because we're on social media all day, every day as a business owner doesn't mean that our customers are. So, they're on their mobile phone whilst they're sat in the loo, whilst they're grabbing a sandwich in their lunch break, they're 10 minutes before they go to bed whilst they're watching a box set on Netflix. So you've got to think about their user habits and, you can't make people think too much. I think we've gone to a point now where people are just having to think so much. They just, their mind just can't comprehend it. And I think people are too clever. And instead, what we need to do as a business owner is just get someone to come a step closer to us. So rather than asking open questions, in actual fact, a closed question is far better because I can get a micro commitment from someone, so rather than me saying, hey, what do you think is the best way to build a business on social media? If I just said, do you think using Instagram is the best way to build your business? Yes or no? It's easier for someone to answer that. They're going to give me the same answer, but it's easier for them to engage with it, which means that they're committed to taking some level of action with my world. And then I just keep doing that and doing that and doing that until they're ready and comfortable to make that buying decision with me.
Yeah, I love the simplicity. It's brilliant. And you have some very powerful personal stories. You nearly died twice in 24 hours between an earthquake and the tsunami in Bali, followed by an airplane falling. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was a pretty intense 24 hours. So, this is when we were traveling around the world. So, we was in Bali and, we had the 3 kids with us. My mum was traveling with us at the time. She came out for 2-3 months. We brought her out with us and, that was a load of fun. And so for one night only, we said, right, we're going to head over to Lombok because if you've ever seen Bali on Instagram, like the image of the swings in the sea, like it's really famous and everyone wants to go there. Well, that's over at Gili Island. So we thought we're going to go over there. And we went over there, we did the drive, everything was fine. And as soon as we got into the hotel, the earthquake happened. And it was 7.6 on the Richter scale. It was just 10 kilometers below the surface. So it was super powerful. And tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, sadly, were killed during the earthquake. 250,000, I remember, if I remember correctly, right? So it was a pretty crazy experience to go through. And then there was a threat of the tsunami, so we had to run up the hill and whatever, right, to escape. The tsunami wasn't actually that bad, but the threat of the tsunami is the fear thing, right? So, but we kind of managed that. It was a weird thing because, I mean, my wife she was petrified, but I actually thought it was kind of cool. Like my instinct just kind of took over of it being quite a fun experience, really, kind of being outdoors and escaping from danger. And it's pretty weird. Later on, the next day, obviously we wanted to get off the island, because we wanted to get back home, get back to the kids and everything like that, make sure everyone's safe. And, it was, basically our plane was supposed to leave at 7:30 at night. It was 7:25. We're literally queuing to walk onto the plane. And then they said, oh, by the way, your plane's cancelled. We're like, that's insane. There's no way that we could literally be told your plane's arrived, people are walking to it to board it, and now it's actually never even arrived. So people are thinking something weird's going on. 2-3 minutes later, another plane is announced. Nobody has a ticket for, nobody knows what it is, but it's been announced. And so people are like, what the hell is going on? We're thinking this is obviously our plane or something like that. And what they was doing, because Bali is super corrupt, they had this plane and they was letting all the Balinese people jump onto this plane. a load of people are kind of kicking off and complaining about the situation. And then I noticed there was a Chinese couple with their young kids. They sneaked through security. They ran down the little runway across the tarmac and they jumped onto this plane. So I was thinking, whoa, this is insane. And so I said to my wife, whilst the security guys are like holding back people who are shouting and getting angry because it's pretty obvious what's happening at this moment. It's a real corrupt situation. I just kind of give her a nudge and say, right, we're going for it. So we ran through and we sneaked onto this plane. And we're expecting this plane to be full. You know, it's about a 100-seater plane. There's like 10 people on it. So it's a real dodgy situation. And we kind of sat down on the plane. We're praying, thinking, oh, my God, like, just don't get arrested. Don't be stuck in some sort of Bali prison. Whatever's going to go wrong with this. Anyway, the plane takes off. And it was 30 seconds, 45 seconds in. And the plane just goes, makes all the crunching noises. And it just drops out of the sky. And, you know, I've been in bad turbulence before, but I've never experienced a plane where literally I've been lifted out of my seat because it's dropped so quickly. But it was okay. It didn't dive or crash, and it kind of kept going. And, yeah, it did that then for the next 20 minutes all the way home. And all that's coming into our head is, if you've ever seen, what's the film? Final Destination, you know, where death kind of follows you around, like trying to get you.
Right.
And we're thinking, oh shit, like this is our time. So we was panicking because nobody knew it was on that plane. It was an unlisted, unnamed plane. So we get all the worst things in the world that could have happened.
Now I'm going to take you all the way back because that's while you were successful building the business. But yeah. Speaking of death and life, you had an experience that springboarded you into success that most people wouldn't think of, which is an attempted suicide. And how that springboarded you is what you've said to success. What do you mean by that? As far as how did that do that?
So basically I'd had what I would say in quotations, a successful life. Like I'd always done pretty well. Like I'd earned 6 figures, had a nice house, you know, had all the things that you should do, nice car, whatever, right? But I'd always struggled with my entire adult life with happiness. And for many years, tried to achieve happiness. You know, I'd done all the things. And there's always this kind of feeling inside of me of, I just don't really know what it is. And I would see other people, they say they're happy. And I'd be thinking, well, I don't really feel happy in this situation, but everyone else is. So I always felt like a bit of an outsider, a bit, you know, on my own. And I couldn't quite figure out my own thoughts. I thought I was probably a bit weird with all this stuff. And then there was just a period where, you know, we just went through like a real shitty 6 months. The company that I was working for, I was self-employed, but I was working for a company. They basically got shut down, cost me like tens of thousands of pounds of lost money. We were literally just about to buy an incredible, beautiful house to actually, we really don't have enough money to even afford our bills this month. Like it was a real drastic shock. The day that it happened where, you know, we basically went through the process of, you know, looking to do something and didn't go ahead with it. And what it made me realize was, having kind of come through the other side of it, is actually when things even went as horribly wrong as they could have ever gone. I mean, I don't think there's a much worse situation than that, where it's so bad that you want to like finish things, you want to end things. And to then bounce back from that and actually kind of a week or so later, you just kind of think to yourself, well, do you know what? It's not that bad actually. And when you've faced yourself at your absolute worst, it kind of removes all fear from you, because you think, do you know what? Fuck it. I might as well go for it, because all this stuff that held me back, and this fear and this worry about judgment and whether I'm doing the right thing and self-doubt, I thought, do you know what? I completely failed trying to do what everyone else tells me to do. Screw it. I'm just going to do what I think's best from now on. I'm going to stop listening to people who say they've got my best intentions, but maybe don't. I'm going to trust my gut, and I'm going to follow my heart. I'm going to go for it and see what happens. And even if it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter, because it didn't work out very well the first time anyway. And that was it. It just took the shackles off me. And I just made a decision that I'm just going to go for it. And from that moment on, I just asked myself 2 questions. Does this make me happy? Does this take me closer to freedom? And if the answer is no, then I just stop doing it. And I just progressively get closer and closer to happiness and freedom, my version of that for me and my family and my life. And that's all I do. That's all my life is. That's my pursuit now. I just pursue happiness, more enlightenment, more joy, more love in my life. As simple as that.
those two questions are so powerful. I mean, that's just incredible to just stop. If everybody thought, does this make me happy? And does this bring me closer to freedom? I think that combo is so powerful. It's an awesome way for us to end the show because you've been fantastic, Danny. So appreciate it. I said Dan to start the show, so I apologize because I know you go by Danny. And I just want to make sure I apologize for that. I want to make sure people can find you. And we have links in the social media and everything as far as on our show notes for everyone to find you. Instagram is obviously a main site for you because that's what you provided. It's Instagram.com/Danny Clark Official. I love that. I love that you have the official on there so nobody can steal you away. And then on Facebook, you're official Dan and Liz. Correct? Yep. Awesome. Correct. Any other way that's great for people to find you?
Or just via our website, which is www.jointhevip.co.uk.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
No worries. My pleasure.
And for our listeners, you know what's coming up next. That is Question of the Week. This week's question is, hey, Mike, we know you like to scuba dive. So what is an experience you would love to have scuba diving you haven't had yet? Like, would you like to dive with sharks? Well, I've scuba dived and been near sharks, around sharks, had them swim under me, had them swim over me. So no, that's not it. That, for me, is not the moment I would love to experience with a creature. For me, I have a dream of diving with whale sharks. They're these giant, massive, magnificent creatures that are known for being so gentle. I would love to just be swimming alongside them and to have that serene, quiet experience with such magnificent size of a creature. I think it would be beautiful, awe-inspiring, and incredible. So for me, that's it. It is swimming. Now, I don't mean swimming on top of the water, underwater, scuba diving with whale sharks. What's yours? I'd love to hear. Tell us at our discussion group on Facebook. All you do is look up the Respect Podcast discussion group. I'd love to hear your answer to what's an experience you'd like to have. It doesn't have to be scuba diving. What's just an awe-inspiring experience you'd love to have? We'd love to hear your questions, your thoughts, and your ideas. And the best place to leave those with us is on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Mutually Amazing Podcast. Of course, you can always contact us on our website at mutuallyamazingpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to this show so you automatically get it every week. And if you could, take one moment to leave a review. That really helps other people find the show, which we are greatly appreciative of. So thank you so much for joining us. May you make today and every day a life full of mutually amazing relationships.